evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of TBR, and I'm George Binns. And as you probably noticed, this is election season, and we are having a competition for the mayor of Beverly. And we have with us this evening the competitor to the mayor, Brendan Sweeney.
Thanks, George.
So after 2 terms as a city councilor at large, I guess you're seeing some differences that you'd like to implement.
Yep. Yeah, so thank you again for having me. I always enjoy being in the BevCam studio, and just for anybody listening at home who may not know me, my name is Brendan Sweeney. I am a current at-large city councilor. I'm in my 2nd term on the city council, and I'm running for mayor of Beverly this year. A little bit about me professionally. So I currently work as the assistant town administrator and finance director in the town of Boxford, where I manage the town's more than $40 million budget. I negotiate our union contracts, and generally I work to get results and make sure that town government is well run for the residents of Boxford. Before my time working for the town of Boxford, I worked in the administration of Governor Charlie Baker in the Office of Administration and Finance, where one of the big projects I managed was about a $500 million relief fund for cities and towns during the COVID-19 pandemic, which gave me a good chance to have a window into the challenges that municipalities were facing and make sure that I was doing all that I could to effectively communicate with those municipalities and successfully deploy funding for their response efforts. I'm also very active in the Massachusetts Municipal Association. I'm president of the Massachusetts Municipal Councilors Association, and I work with Lieutenant Governor Kim Driscoll on the Local Government Advisory Committee. And so through that role, I've been able to advocate for Beverly's needs on statewide policy issues. And in particular, I've really been a strong advocate for the state revisiting the Chapter 70 funding formula that brings funding into Beverly for education. I'd like the state to revisit the special education funding formula. That's something I've advocated for. And I've advocated for increased Chapter 90 funding, which would bring money in for roads and sidewalks in Beverly. So I believe that blend of experience, both my time on the city council, where I've introduced a proposal that was successfully adopted that doubled property tax exemptions for seniors and veterans. I've worked with my colleagues to modernize parking ordinances and make sure that those are up to date and that signage is accurate. And I have responded promptly to every constituent call or email. So between my experience on the council and my professional experience, I believe that I would be able to bring a qualified new perspective to the mayor's office.
So you're going to be able to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
You know what the game is, you know how to play it.
Exactly.
And I guess one of the things that you mentioned in there that you're assistant town manager.
Yes. And finance director.
Yeah, and finance director. But a town manager kind of government is different than what we have here.
Yep.
And I guess what it does is requires you to coordinate more directly with the city council. Was it a town council?
So we have a select board. And basically, for anybody listening at home, so the way the town government differs, in a city government like we have here in Beverly, it's a little more kind of like a state government where the mayor is the elected chief executive like a governor is here, and then the city council is the legislative body, and we just have one branch as a city instead of 2, like Congress and other branches of government. But the difference in a town is that the elected executive is the select board, which the easiest parallel to think of is like a board of directors in a private company.
Yeah.
And they appoint the town administrator, who kind of serves as the CEO on behalf of the board in running the town's day-to-day functions. And then it's actually a body called town meeting that's open to any registered voter. That's the legislative body that meets once a year. And so some parallels are the town administrator position, just like the mayor position, needs to make sure that the budget is balanced and that city government is running effectively.
Yeah.
And so I've developed those skills during my time working for the town of Boxford. One thing that I think is beneficial about the town form of government that requires a little more intentionality in the city form, and is something I'd like to bring if I'm elected mayor, is that the town form of government, there's a whole host of stakeholders involved in big decisions. The select board obviously is the elected executive policymakers, but there are appointed finance committees, and there are usually a handful of other committees formed of volunteers that need to be involved in the decision-making process. And so in Boxford, we actually just recently, a town meeting approved a proposal to build a new public works facility. And our current facility was built in 1970, so it was long overdue. That's a big capital project.
Yeah.
And so in order to get that across the finish line, we as an administration started presenting the concept, the general cost estimates, and explaining the need to the residents of Boxford about 6 months prior to town meeting, so that there were multiple public engagement sessions, that in open session, the select board, the finance committee, the permanent building committee, they were all reviewing and tweaking the proposal with resident feedback in mind until we got to a point where we felt we had a proposal that met the need of the town, that had public buy-in, and that had already been clearly explained to both policymakers and residents, so that by the time town meeting came around, there was already that collective buy-in, and the voters at town meeting felt that the project had already been adequately explained, and then ultimately they voted overwhelmingly to support it. In the city form of government, it's really incumbent on the mayor to be intentional about having that level of engagement. The way that our government's structured, there is a lot of authority vested in the strong mayor, in our strong mayor form of government. In an ideal world, and for the benefit of kind of collective buy-in, the mayor would be bringing proposals to the city council earlier in the process, especially with the budget, but notably with larger capital proposals, so that there can be feedback both from councilors who were kept in the loop earlier on and from residents. And so that by the time we got to the point where, you know, the equivalent of town meeting voting in a city form is a city council voting, by the time the city council is voting on a project, there's already been some level of public dialogue and public input. What's happening now, and I think about the library HVAC project that was presented last year and that the council voted down, is that a lot of these discussions that happen in public in the town of Boxford are happening behind closed doors in City Hall. And then by the time a proposal is brought to the city council, where us as councilors are hearing about it for the first time, the mayor's saying, okay, here's the proposal, time to vote. To me, that's no way to foster the kind of collective community buy-in that we need to advance those type of big projects. And so that's one lesson that I've learned from the town form of government, is that that type of proactive engagement is incredibly important. And if I'm elected mayor, I would intend to bring that level of intentional, proactive public engagement to the process of developing a large capital project or developing our city's budget.
Well, I think the biggest part of the problem with the library was it was originally proposed at like 3.84 million.
Yep.
And then, like you said, everything went behind closed doors and it came out at 18 million.
Yeah, and the scope had changed significantly. The price had quadrupled, and to me,
I mean, that sticker shock that, and you start to wonder, how could they ever expect it to get passed? I mean, and city council doing due diligence would have to say, what? Let's back up a second and find out, how do we get here from there?
and that's what ultimately, you know, I was in the majority that voted against the project because of those concerns. Why did the costs escalate so significantly? How does this impact our ability to tackle some of the other necessary capital projects? And I know we'll get into that about, that's why it's so important to actually have a capital plan instead of just jump from project to project. But the intentionality of engaging early on in the process of developing a big proposal like that is incredibly important. I've seen how that is a successful model at the town level, and that's something I want to implement here in the city of Beverly.
Well, it's gotten to be multiple incidents. We went through the same kind of escalation of prices with the renovations of City Hall.
Yeah, we're still waiting on that proposal. It's been delayed about a year, but we're supposed to have an update later this month from the mayor.
So we started out at 18 million, and then it got to be 25 million, then it got to be 34.8 million, and then it's back to 25 or so.
We'll find out. We're still waiting on the
so,
update.
Again, projects at this level, I think, deserve a heck of a lot more buy-in.
Yes, they do. And that's why the management side of this job is so important. And those are the skill sets that I believe I would bring to the office of the mayor. I've developed capital plans in the town of Boxford. I've shepherded through large capital projects like this DPW project that we're now going to be starting to construct this summer. And I've built multi-million-dollar budgets with public buy-in. So I think I have the experience, and I'd be able to bring both the experience, but then plans for how to tweak and improve the process to get that public buy-in that I think has been missing from a lot of the bigger projects we've been considering.
Well, the other thing too comes up is you've been out talking with the
Yep,
constituents.
knocking on plenty of doors, and I've still got plenty of doors to knock on between
Yeah.
now and November.
So what are you hearing?
So I hear a lot about two things in particular. Roads and sidewalks, I would say that's probably the number one thing that I hear about. The other thing that I hear about are the schools. And so we'll get into this in greater detail, but as you know, and I would encourage anybody listening to please check out the website, sweeneyforbeverly.com, to read my blueprint for Beverly. And so there's 5 issues that I address, and I'll get into those in greater detail, but I want to focus on the 2 that I'm hearing a lot about from residents, which is our infrastructure and the schools. And so on roads and sidewalks, what I'm hearing a lot from residents both is a concern for the current state of roads and sidewalks in our city, which I think really needs some attention. They objectively are not in a great state when compared to our neighboring towns. And so while I understand that this is a multi-year process, what we don't have now is that multi-year plan. And so what I'd like to do is put together at least a 3-year plan based on what's called a pavement condition index, which is a objective analysis both of road quality and the frequency with which the roads are traveled upon to determine which roads are the highest need for attention.
Yeah. Well, we've had this for a while. They've
Well,
had,
we have the pavement condition index. My issue with how the mayor currently runs it is we go on a year-to-year basis, and the pavement condition index isn't the end-all, be-all when making these determinations. There's other subjective factors that the mayor considers when determining which roads he would like to see paved. And so what I think we need to do is take an objective analysis, put a multi-year plan together, and commit funding in advance. And that's what we're not doing now. So we get funding from the state, and we have some funding in the local budget, which has fluctuated. The mayor's actually proposing to cut it back this year from the budget and to use free cash instead. Without a commitment that says, okay, we know locally, like, we are going to put $3 million in every year for the next 3 years, and anticipating a Chapter 90 funding level of whatever it is, $2 million from the state. That money, we believe, will be able to pave this set of roads over the next 3 years. And obviously that plan's going to change, but at least then residents have some idea of the magnitude of the work and where, $15 million over 3 years or whatever the number is would actually get, what the end outcome would be.
let's go back to a simpler question. How does the resident find out what this index is, and what's the status of the road in front of their house, which is of most interest?
So there is some information on the engineering department website, so the engineering page on the city's website. And I'd certainly encourage residents to check that out. But only 2 years worth of work is listed, the year that we're in right now and next year. And I think that's where we need a 3-year outlook, not just the 1-year outlook, so the residents can understand what the city's plan is. I mean, that's what I hear the most about. And same with the schools, we'll get into that, is this sense that there isn't a plan for how to incrementally improve upon the things that people see in the city that need work. And that's like the roads and sidewalks. But on the schools, what I hear a lot about, both some general concerns, which I know we'll talk in greater detail, but this idea that there is not a real stream of communication between the administration, school leadership, and the teachers and paraprofessionals. And I know that I really think it's a matter of the mayor taking it upon himself to more proactively engage with the school leadership and with the teachers and paraprofessionals. And I think the strike was a big example of that breakdown in communication, where if the mayor is not at the bargaining table until after the strike had started, over a year into negotiations, then there's never a real opportunity to build the relationship and hear directly from the teachers and paraprofessionals about the challenges that the schools are facing. And collectively, we need to have that level of dialogue so that we can all get on the same page about how best to address these issues with the limited financial resources that we have.
Well, one of the things that bothered me about the negotiations for the teachers' contract was the school board sets a budget, and then they send it into the mayor's office to get it massaged, and they get feedback as to, okay, I know what you want, but this is what we can afford. Understand that's the way it works. But why were we having the negotiations after the budget got set? Really, the negotiations was a major ingredient to the budget.
Yeah.
And That should have been resolved before we even started on the budget.
And that's one thing I mentioned. I'm at the table in all of our union negotiations in Boxford. We work incredibly hard to make sure that the agreements are settled for the following fiscal year in advance of town meeting. Town meeting is when the voters vote on the budget. And if we don't have an agreement by town meeting, it's hard for us to actually make a determination about what the salary and benefit costs will be for the coming years, because we can't factor in an agreement that hasn't been settled.
Yeah.
And so that is one thing. I know there are challenges, but during the time that I've been on the city council, I don't think we've once settled an agreement in advance of a fiscal year. It's almost always been after the agreement has expired, and then that means that we have to come to an agreement retroactively, and we go into the fiscal year not knowing what the salaries and benefits will be for the union in question.
Well,
and if I'm
invariably,
elected,
what happens is that you've got to come up with extra money. Where do you get it from? Roads and sidewalks.
yeah,
Because
we're
that-
making
they-
cuts, we're transferring from reserves that we could otherwise utilize elsewhere in the budget, and that's, to me, it's a little reactionary. And I
Yeah.
see, generally speaking, a more reactive approach than I think is beneficial to the city in how we're currently managed. And in municipal government, if you're not proactive, then these issues will really creep up on you. And that's how you get to a point where the city's road and sidewalk network is in rough shape, or residents feel that they're not having their voices heard on big projects. And that's how you get to a point where a sizable capital renovation, like the library HVAC proposal, is voted down, even though the entirety of the council agrees that work needs to be done on that building. You need to be proactive, and you need to proactively engage the public. And that's the approach that I will bring if I'm elected mayor.
So you mentioned you were getting a lot of feedback on the schools. Do you have anything else in mind besides the conflict that ended up in a strike?
Well, certainly the lack of communication and trust needs to be improved. And I'm optimistic that we can build back toward that level of trust and communication and collaboration. And remember that we are all on the same team in terms of wanting what's best for Beverly students. But the challenge is going to be the financial constraints that we have. And we had a very good discussion last night with Dr. Chirochik at our finance and property meeting on the city council, reviewing her and the school committee's proposed FY26 budget for the schools. The challenge is that it is absolutely essential that we maintain capacity in the classroom-facing positions, and that's teachers, paraprofessionals, any intervention specialists, our in-district special education, which is an incredibly important program that we need to build upon. And so those were the type of questions that I was asking. What are we doing to maintain capacity in these positions? Are there concerns that there are financial constraints? But the reality, which we discussed in detail, is that the next fiscal year's budget, FY27, is currently in a structural deficit. And I'm not surprised. We've been spending the last couple of fiscal years at a rate greater than our revenues, and I've cited that the last couple of budgets, my concerns. So that means that we really are going to have to be intentional about finding creative solutions. And we can't do that if there's not a collaborative process to get to those solutions. Yeah. Right now, the process has been much more adversarial than it has been collaborative. The strike is an obvious example of that. And so while I don't know specifically what I plan to do if I'm elected mayor with the FY27 budget, which is a year in advance, I do know that the only way to get to a solution that brings the best outcomes for our students is for the mayor to be willing to roll up his or her sleeves, dive into the issues that the schools are facing, and make sure that there is an open line of communication with the teachers and paraprofessionals who are the ones working directly with the kids and are seeing the challenges that we're facing as a school district.
Well, one of the things that bothers me about that approach is that, okay, it's nice to get all the team together and work like a team, fine. But if you go online, my two favorites are either U.S. News and World Report or Niche, and get an evaluation of the school system as a whole compared to the rest of the state, for instance. And Beverly is ranked pretty good, a B plus kind of ranking. Then you get to the page where it says, what's the achievement level of the students? And it's barely 50% in both reading and math. And it has a very pronounced dip in achievement level in the middle school.
Yes.
So, I mean, there is a concern in my mind,
in mine as well,
that the quality of the education it had a problem with the COVID. Okay, I can understand that. But COVID's been over 3 years. How are we going to get the level of achievement up to something really more than just 50%?
Well, it needs to be an intentional effort, and it needs to be treated with the urgency that it deserves. And I
Well,
asked
it needs
Dr.
to be far enough up in the priority list that, oh yeah, it's nice to have more teachers' aides or more teachers, but what about the quality of the work?
And I do think the capacity of the support staff is important to student achievement. And so I asked Dr. Torochik a handful of questions at our meeting last night around this topic of student achievement. And she contested the assertion that MCAS scores were declining, which, if you do look throughout the course of Mayor Cahill's tenure, proficiency levels on MCAS across subjects and across grade levels have declined from 2014 to now. And so while that has been a general trend across the state and is not a unique issue in Beverly, that doesn't mean that it's something that we can just chalk up to a statewide trend and ignore going forward. And so that's what I think is incredibly important, is that we're outlining tangible actions that we plan to take to improve student achievement performance, test scores and whatnot.
Yeah.
And so I don't know yet what those tangible actions are, but I know that we need to do a serious audit of our district operations to better analyze where are areas of weakness, and to have that collective conversation as a community about what areas do we need to make investments in order to make sure that our students are able to meet the levels of achievement that we as a district should be prioritizing. Yeah. And I think that's an incredibly important task that the next mayor is really going to have to put at the forefront of the agenda. How do we improve student achievement?
Well, that's the reason they have the mayor as a member of the school board.
Yeah.
To get the feedback from the population, the taxpayers. And yeah, it's nice to be able to talk to your city councilor and to your school board representative. But if you get to the mayor and you get his ear or her ear, and you get the message across enough times that there are other things besides roads and sidewalks that need to be worried about. Mm-hmm. And I think that's an important direction that the city needs to be taking.
And that is, in talking about what I'm hearing at the doors, that's the third thing I'm hearing. So I hear a lot about roads and sidewalks in schools, but the last thing that I hear about is this lack of responsiveness from the current administration. People feel that when they have an issue, they're not able to get in touch with the mayor and have a substantive dialogue about how the city is working to address that issue. And they feel like the city is not doing a good enough job pushing out communications about how the city is operating, what the progress is on any big projects. And I think in the absence of that responsiveness and in the absence of that proactive communication, it's really hard for people to get engaged with city government in a productive way. And that's where you end up with folks who are frustrated because they see the issues, they see the state that the roads and sidewalks are in, they see directly the concerns with the school system. And if they're not hearing from city government about how those issues are being addressed, I think it's fair for them to assume that we're not doing what we need to do in order to tackle these big problems. And so that's the third thing. Responsiveness and communication is incredibly important for the mayor of Beverly in order to make sure that folks are kept in the loop and are able to provide their feedback when we discuss how best to address these issues.
Yeah. So back to the point, you're running for mayor again. Mm-hmm. And we're now at the point where you get to make your pitch to the audience.
Well, thank you, George. The half hour always goes too fast, but I know we've got another show scheduled.
There's a lot of issues to talk about, yeah.
Yeah, and there will be a lot of discussion between now and Election Day on November 4th, and I welcome that.
So come back again and we'll continue on.
Definitely. But I do want to make sure to thank everybody who tuned in tonight to listen to this show. As I mentioned, my name is Brendan Sweeney. I'm a current city councilor, and I'm running for mayor of Beverly. And there are really three main reasons why I'm running for mayor. First is that I believe it's time for a change. The current mayor has been in office for 12 years. And while I certainly respect his service to the city of Beverly, I think we would greatly benefit from new perspective in the mayor's office. Which brings me to my second reason. Not only am I going to be the one to bring that new perspective, but I have the expertise to do the job. As we talked about, I worked both on the city council for the last 4 years, but professionally in the town of Boxford, managing budgets, negotiating with unions, and getting results for the residents of the town. And I plan to bring that expertise to step into the job day one without a learning curve and get right to work solving these difficult issues that are going to be facing our city both now and in the future. And that's bringing me to the third reason of why I'm running, is that I believe I can make tangible improvements to how City Hall is operating currently. I believe that I can improve the responsiveness for the core constituent services needs. I believe that I can improve communication proactively with both the City Council and residents to make sure that we are collectively making the big decisions together that our city is going to face. And I believe that I can implement the plans necessary to make sure that we are financially stable as a community, both in terms of our budget, but implementing a capital plan, which we really only have a narrative document now. I'd like to make sure that that's a much more tangible plan for the next 5 years for how we're going to tackle our big projects. And so those are the three reasons why I'm running. In terms of my priorities, I would encourage you to go to sweeneyforbeverly.com to read my blueprint for Beverly. And there are 5 priorities within that blueprint that I'd like to focus on. The first is responsive services and transparent government, which we already talked a lot about. It's very important for city leaders, and if I'm elected mayor, I intend to live out this commitment to be engaged in the community, to hold regular town halls, to provide active updates on social media, and to engage in new media too, newsletters, podcasts. There's a lot of opportunities there to improve our communication, and I plan to take advantage of those opportunities if I'm elected mayor. The second is infrastructure, which we talked about, both addressing the road and sidewalk needs and the facility needs in our city, our coastal infrastructure as well. Obviously, sustainability is very important, and as a city, we need to make sure that we have a good stormwater system and a good coastal resiliency infrastructure, and we can't achieve those things without a plan. And so I want to put a plan together with the input from the council to make sure that we are working toward achieving these infrastructure improvements. Third is our schools, and as we talked about, there's both a need to improve communication and trust between leadership and both the school administration, but then teachers and paraprofessionals, and to make sure that we're mapping out a plan with clear objectives for how we improve student performance in the Beverly Public Schools. Fourth reason I'm running is strong financial management, and that goes back to my background. I feel very confident in my municipal finance expertise and my ability to make sure that we are crafting a budget that's sustainable. And with limited revenues in local government, which we have under Proposition 2.5, it is incredibly important that we are intentional about making sure that we're not just getting by year to year, but that we're planning over multiple fiscal years for a sustainable budget, and that we are offering key services in the most efficient way possible. Which brings me to my fifth point. It's incredibly important that we preserve the city's high quality of life. And I think in order to do that, we need to make sure that there are housing opportunities that are reasonably priced so that people aren't being priced out of Beverly. And I think we need to be strategic about looking at opportunities to build smaller multifamily housing, which I call as the missing middle housing, to make sure that we're addressing that gap in affordable housing stock that currently exists in our city. We need to make sure we're investing in our public safety departments. It's incredibly important that we support the work of our police and fire departments and all that they do to keep our city safe. And third, we are a welcoming community, and I want to make sure that we're building off of those efforts in order to break down language access barriers, break down accessibility barriers, and make sure that we are bringing folks from across the city to participate in public life. So those are the 5 key pillars of my blueprint for Beverly. Again, if you would like to learn more, please visit sweeneyforbeverly.com, and I look forward to talking with you out on the doors between now and Election Day on November 4th. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for being with us this evening. And like you mentioned, there's a lot to talk about, and I'd like to have you come back again sometime and
I will definitely be
continue
back.
the discussion. And ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for watching this evening, and stay tuned. There'll be more.